Hi everyone. So we're going to be talking about awareness next. And awareness is really, in my opinion, the absolute most important aspect of our mindset journey. Until we become aware of what is going on in our lives, in all of the different areas of our lives, we cannot start to make changes. Yeah, so our unconscious mind really does so much work for us all of the time, which is great, but also not so great because we can get into habits of doing things over and over and over again that impact our daily life and impact our long-term future, and we don't even realize that we're doing them. So let's take a quick peek at different areas of our lives and how the awareness can make a huge difference. So for instance, let's talk nutrition. I don't know how many clients have come to me and said, oh, I don't need help with my nutrition. I eat really well and that area is good. And I always say, that is fantastic. That is great. I'm so glad you've got that portion under control. Let's journal and write down exactly what you're eating for just 3 days and then come back to me and bring that journal or that tracking sheet with you, and we're going to go over it together. And I'm not trying to say this to point anybody out, because you may be one of those people who thinks their nutrition is really great, but the answer is always amazing to me. Never, ever do I have a client, okay, here's my journals, tell me what's wrong because I think it's fantastic. Every single time a client takes the 3 days to journal their food, they come back to me and they say, Briar, I know exactly what I need to change. I see now by writing things down what I'm actually eating on a day-to-day basis. And most people know from a food standpoint what foods are more nutritious for them than others. And they don't need me to tell them those things. So we really need to be aware of what foods are going into our body in order to have our weight under control, to have the energy that we need for our day-to-day activities, to keep our mood stable. So that is an example of being aware of our nutrition. Same thing happens for exercise. We think that we are really strong in an area. Maybe you're a runner, for instance. Or maybe you are a swimmer, or maybe you really just want more energy to be able to play with your children on the schoolyard, right? And we don't really realize how much or how little exercise we're doing in a day. And for some people, they're actually doing a lot more than they realize. I have clients who come to me and they say, oh, I'm not active at all. I really need to bump up my exercise. And we start looking at their day-to-day routines and realize that they're actually incredibly active. Maybe they are walking 20 minutes back and forth to school to drop their kids off 4 times a day. They take their kids to school, they come back. They go back at the end of the day, they come home with their children. Maybe it's 6 times a day. Maybe they pick their kids up for lunch, and they don't realize that exercise is accumulative over the course of the day. So add that up, all that time, over 4 or 6 times throughout the day, and they're actually doing a fair amount of exercise in one area. And maybe they just need to add a little bit of resistance training, right? Or maybe going back to my example of a runner, maybe they run all the time. They're fantastic runners, but their upper body strength is really lacking. So we need to be aware of what's going on and how much activity we're doing in a day. Now let's go to the awareness of our mindset. So we've been talking about journaling, and until we start writing down some of our thoughts or being aware of how we are speaking to ourselves or what we are thinking about on a day-to-day basis about ourselves or others or even our day-to-day activities, it's very hard to start making those changes. So maybe you're the type of person who is constantly running through a to-do list in their mind. Okay, I've got so much to do today. I need to figure out what we're having for dinner. We need to pick out clothes for the day, and we're just constantly running through things in our mind. And what you may not realize is that having that constant to-do list going through in your head is quite stressful, right? If you just wrote that to-do list down, knew that it was out of your mind and on paper, or in a list in your phone, somewhere that you could revert back to, you wouldn't have to constantly be thinking about it all the time. You could just add individual items to that to-do list when you thought of them and let them go out of your head. So that's an area or an example of being aware of our mindset or our thoughts. And then that leads us into our behaviors. So being aware of how we are speaking to others, not only the words that we're using, but our tone of voice. Maybe we are in a reactive mode all the time. So instead of actually being open and having an open mind and an open heart, we are in constant reactive mode. And often that is when we are overstressed, overtired, or not in a good headspace, not in a good mindset. Maybe there's a lot of other things going on in our lives that are not so good, and then we are taking it out on the people that are closest to us. That happens quite frequently. So that's something to be aware of as well, is our behaviors and our actions. So there are all sorts of areas of lives that we need to be part of that dictate journaling process that you're doing this week. That as you are writing down what is on the top of your mind, we're going to start becoming more aware of different portions in our lives. And one of the things to go along with this week, you're doing your breathing exercises, just 25 long, 25 long, controlled, slow breaths will actually be a moment to sort of pause. And you can do that any time of the day that works for you. But maybe at that time, once you have taken those 25 deep breaths, that is a really great time to just pause for a second and be aware. Be aware of where you are in your day. Be aware of what state you are in. If you are in that reactive mode, and we'll talk about that a little bit more next week, or if you are in that open, free mindset and heart space. So being aware, take a moment or two or three or four or five throughout your day to just pause and be aware of where you're at and how you are feeling. And then that will also come into play when you're doing your dictate journaling this week. So that is our topic on awareness this week for our mindset work. Let me know if you have questions.